On January 4th, 2004, during the pontificate of Pope John Paul II, an international group of 9 laymen and priests met in Mexico City. Their purpose? To celebrate the presence of Christ in the Eucharist and to proclaim loudly from the mountaintops the words of John Paul II and the Church that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our faith. In honor of our Blessed Mother, the Mother of Hope, the expedition began at the Shrine of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which stands on Tepeyac Hill outside Mexico City. At Tepeyac, in 1531, a poor Indian named Juan Diego experienced 4 apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Juan Diego's tilma miraculously revealed the image of Our Lady and is preserved and displayed here. Before leaving for the mountains, the team celebrated Mass at the shrine, praying for a safe and successful expedition. A local Mexican priest, Father Ernesto Arriaga, originally planned to join the expedition, but was unable to climb because of sickness. Also, Father Alberto Reyes, a young Cuban priest, was having difficulty getting his visa to leave Cuba. Father Alberto revised his plans and was now planning to join the team for the second part of the expedition. The Eucharist team left Mexico City and traveled 3 hours east to a town called Amecameca, which lies at the foot of Mexico's second and third largest mountains, Popocatépetl or Popo and Iztaccíhuatl or Ixta. Ancient Mexicans used to worship these volcanoes as gods. In Amecameca, which has an altitude of almost 8,000 feet above sea level, the team gathered water and last-minute supplies. Popo is an active volcano and started erupting in December 1994, causing thousands of people to evacuate the area. These evacuations are over now, but Popocatépetl has been closed to climbing since that time and probably will remain closed for years. Ixta, in contrast, is a volcano popular with climbers and was the team's first destination. Ixta is 17,400 feet high. A rough 3-hour ride was ahead of them as they moved toward base camp. Sunshine greeted the climbers on the morning of January 5th. Each day, the team set out to make prayer and the Eucharist the center of their experience.
We ask that you keep us safe.
The team's goal on its first day in the mountains was acclimatization. It is extremely important to allow the body to acclimatize to the limited amount of oxygen in the air at high altitudes. A decrease in oxygen makes it easier for the body and mind to fatigue, thus making falls among a host of other dangers much more likely.
Over 15,000 feet, the group takes to the knife edge of the ridge and does a little bit of rock climbing, free climbing.
Along the way, the group came across numerous memorials. Every year, on average, a few people will perish on each of these mountains. The Eucharist Expedition's objective included much more than merely reaching the summit of these giant volcanoes. The expedition's main focus was celebrating the presence of Christ in the Eucharist and was inspired by the life and witness of Pope John Paul II. When he was a priest in Poland, he would take the young people into the mountains for Mass, prayer, and adventure. Jerry, a 21-year-old Canadian student, originally from Poland, describes the joy and inspiration he received when he had the opportunity to meet Pope John Paul II during the World Youth Day events in Toronto during the summer of 2002.
My background is Polish, and inevitable for a Polish person not to admire the head of our church, the Holy Father. He's truly been an inspiration in my life, and I had a dream of meeting the Holy Father many times before the World Youth Day. I thought, what am I going to say? I wasn't ready for this moment. And then all of a sudden, here he is, the man in white, standing right in front of me. And I look at him, he looks at me, and I say to him, Czuwaj Ojcze Święty, which is the Polish Scout greeting. And he is Polish, and he was a scout himself. So right away he recognized me as who I was and said, "Oh, Harcerzyk Polski," which means "Oh, Polish Scout." It was a great experience, kind of the summit of the World Youth Day.
Father Antoine Thomas, a French priest with the community of St. John, began climbing mountains when he was young. Father Antoine understands the unique ability Pope John Paul II had to reach young people and discussed this fact during the climber's first Mass in the mountains.
The Holy Father has been so attentive to children from the beginning of his pontificate. Even the rock and roll, hard rock bands have never been able to gather as many young people as the Holy Father has done in the last 25 years from over 140 countries. That's a sign that the Holy Spirit is definitely working with the Holy Father to heal those people on earth from an absence of God in their life. When we don't have God in our life, we are miserable. We can earn millions of dollars, we can be top players in whatever games. We are miserable if we are not climbing toward the truth, climbing toward heaven. The healing that Jesus provides is a healing that is provided through teaching. And the Holy Father has been such a teacher in the last 25 years. Here is what the Holy Father said. Jesus came to meet men and women, to heal the sick and the suffering, to free those possessed by devils, and to raise the dead. He gave himself on the cross and rose again from the dead, revealing that he is the Lord of life, the author and the source of life without end.
Day 2 in the mountains again brought the team ideal weather for climbing. In Mexico, the most popular climbing season extends from November to March. This is the dry season, with the most stable weather, and Ixta and Orizaba see their best climbing conditions during this time. Sleeping at such high elevation, higher than most of the team members had ever been, made it difficult for some to breathe at night. As the team members set out to climb a little higher and continue with their acclimatization process, a couple of the men started to feel some of the effects of the altitude. Father Bob Holmes, a Basilian priest from Canada and an experienced climber who has climbed these Mexican volcanoes numerous times, explains the dangers of high altitude mountaineering.
What are the effects of altitude on people coming up from very low altitudes like sea level in Cuba or in Toronto at 600 feet? The most obvious thing is mountain sickness, and mountain sickness has several symptoms. A headache is very normal, a queasy stomach, a loss of appetite is very normal. You begin to get tingling in your fingers or your toes. All of that indicates that you're not getting enough oxygen. And so what you do is you breathe, and you breathe deeply. And as you breathe more deeply, your headache subsides, and then your stomach settles too a little bit, and the tingling goes away. If they become very severe, severe headache and nausea and throwing up, and the tingling moves up in your arms, and it's time to go down to get to a lower altitude. The more serious ones, though, are edemas. a pulmonary edema. If you go up too fast and you stay at an altitude, say 18 or 19,000 feet, then the pressures have an effect on your blood, and the fluids begin to fill your lungs. It's like pneumonia. You're gurgling and you can't get enough breath, and when that begins to happen, you have to go down very, very quickly, because you'll die within 24 hours. And even worse than that is when the fluid oozes out into your brain and you get what we call cerebral edema. You know, I passed the bodies of a young German couple on Mount McKinley who had gone up too fast, and they were delirious on the summit. Another couple tried to rope up with them and bring them down, but they just refused. They just wouldn't go down. And you can't force someone, and at that time you don't have enough energy yourself to pull someone down. So they were left there, and they died at 19,000 feet on McKinley. And everybody on the mountain knew they were there because they had been waiting for them and looking for them. And when we went to the summit, we went right by their bodies. So that was cerebral edema. So those are the big dangers.
The destination of the second day's climb was a hut located at close to 16,000 feet. David, a firefighter and an experienced mountain climber from Michigan, expressed the sentiments of the group.
How's the climb going?
The climb is going awesome. I feel alive, feel invigorated, a little tired too, but this is what it's all about. I wouldn't want to be anywhere else in the world right now.
Okay, we've climbed up to the first hut on the Ixta, and we're somewhere between 15 and 16,000 feet. The climb ahead of us is up this next ridge, and it's a very, very steep climb, and we won't be taking that today. We're going to take it tomorrow, and there's another hut there. And after that, it's just a short climb over the rocks to the snow, and then a long hike across the snow to the actual summit. So that's our chore for tomorrow.
And do we have a statue of the Blessed Mother here? Is that?
That, we believe, is the statue of the Blessed Mother that hasn't weathered very well. And this altar has been placed here clearly for us to have our Mass.
Father Bob's homily focused on the power the Eucharist can have in our daily lives and the calling each of us receives to live out Christ's love in the world as we receive his body and blood.
Jesus is able to provide in abundance even when we don't believe that we can do what we're asked to do. We're given a ministry, there's no way we can do it. All we need to do is take what we have and kind of hold it before the Lord and say, this is what we got, bless it, and send us forth. And then he says, unless you eat my body and drink my blood, you won't have part with me. That's when he gets into this, St. John gets into the discussion of the Eucharist. And as the people listen, they shake their heads and they walk away until nobody's left but the disciples. And he looks at them and says, are you going too? And they said, where will we go? Who will we go to? And so he, at the Last Supper, he commissions them to go out and be Eucharistic people. Quote from John Paul. To celebrate the Eucharist, to eat his flesh and drink his blood, means to accept the wisdom of the cross and the path of service. It means that we will signal our willingness to sacrifice ourselves for others, as Christ has done for us. So I think that's our ministry. And I extend that ministry to all of us. Because when we receive Eucharist, we are one with Jesus, then we receive also his mission. All of us.
Father Peter West reiterates Father Holmes's point. God's sacrificial love for us, exemplified most in his crucifixion and in the Eucharist, calls us all, no matter our situation in life, to put the interests of others before our own. an important message as the team prepared for the next day's climb toward the summit.
Everybody can make a sincere gift of themselves to others. And that's what our Lord did in the Eucharist. He said, "Take and eat. This is my body given up for you." And every Christian is called to follow that example of Christ and give their lives as a sacrifice to others. One is fully alive when one makes a sincere gift of themselves, as Christ did in the Eucharist.
After a short night's rest, the team awoke at 2 a.m. and started climbing at 3. It's always important to start climbing early and to keep up a consistent pace throughout the day in order to be off the mountain before it gets too dark.
This is awesome. It's exhausting, but awesome.
The team stopped periodically to pray, eat, and rest. But time, perhaps more than anything else, was their greatest worry. At such an altitude, even the best climber finds it difficult to take more than a dozen short steps at a time before pausing to catch his breath.
Look at this lovely thing, eh? It's a sandwich. Look at that next one.
Yeah.
Just like those extreme skiers.
Oh, those are just nuts.
That's, yeah.
Jordan, one of the team's cameramen, explains his feelings of mountain sickness.
Sick to my stomach, like I was gonna throw up, kind of, and pretty mean headache in the front and the back of the head as well.
Feel better now?
Yeah, it kind of comes and goes. The headache is pretty constant, but the stomach ache, it gets better. It's just, you need the energy from food, yet the more you eat, the sicker you feel, so.
As expected, the team began to break into smaller groups by mid-morning, moving at different speeds. As midday approached, it became clear that 4 members of the team were not going to make it to the summit, while the other 4 were moving ahead steadily. Will Goodman, an experienced outdoorsman, was also suffering.
How are you feeling so far about this climb, Will?
Oh, the climb is great. The spirit is willing, but the stomach is weak.
Hello, I'm David Marshinda, the last member of the foursome that's making a push to the Ixta summit. Hopefully, God willing, we'll make it, all for the glory of God. Just taking a little break here at 16,400 feet, the highest for all of us so far. And we're just going to take out a little medicine for Will and a little food for the rest of us and push on.
Ixta, where we are going to, is past 17,200 feet.
I don't see any snow. Is there any snow around here?
Well, you can see all the way up, probably at 16,500, one of the 2 glaciers that lead to the summit. You need crampons and ice sacks for security, and it's probably another 3 hours to the summit from here. Around 16,400 feet, the wind is gentle. You can see Pico de Orizaba, And way to our right, you can see Popo, Catepet.
It was time for the 4 remaining climbers to brave the glaciers that stood between them and the summit of Ixta. The glaciers can be the most dangerous part of the climb, as poor weather, visibility, or fatigue can cause a step in the wrong direction, which could send a climber down into a hidden crevice or sliding down hundreds or even thousands of feet off the mountain. The view was breathtaking. Around 3 p.m., the remaining members of the team closed in on the summit. Their thoughts and prayers were with the rest of the team, their families, and the church.
But praise God, we've made it. We offer up this hike to all of our family and friends back home, and especially under the protection and guidance of Our Lady of Guadalupe, in full brotherhood with Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. We also want to honor in a special way by this hike our Holy Father, Pope John Paul II, with his love for the mountains and his encouragement to the youth of this world to not settle for a mediocre life, but to reach the heights. And lastly, as we summit this peak, we think and we contemplate on the source and summit of all things, the Most Holy Eucharist.
Jerry shared a prayer uniting the team's effort with the life and faith of Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati. Pier Giorgio was a young Italian mountain climber who was known by his friends as an explosion of joy and was called a man of the Beatitudes by Pope John Paul II. Pier Giorgio led groups of friends to the mountains. He also felt a strong, mysterious urge to be near the Blessed Sacrament. During evening adoration, he would spend all night on his knees in deep prayer. Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati would attend Mass before going to the mountains. He also made it a regular habit upon returning from skiing to visit the Blessed Sacrament. He wrote to a friend, "I left my heart on the mountain peaks, and I hope to retrieve it this summer when I climb Mont Blanc. If my studies permitted, I would spend whole days on the mountains admiring in that pure atmosphere of the magnificence of God." Father Antoine, having grown up climbing the very mountains Blessed Pier Giorgio Frassati mentioned, discusses the mystery and magnetism of the mountains, as well as the importance of fraternal love, both in our everyday lives and in mountaineering.
For me, as a French priest, brother of Saint John, I have never climbed that high in my last 23 years of mountaineering in the Alps, in Colorado, and some people feeling crazy to climb down, to be exhausted, to eat poorly. You know, as the Pope said, Pope John Paul II, mountains reveal its secret to the one who dare to challenge it. You cannot understand mountaineering, the mountaineering spirit, unless you do it. John of the Cross also used to say that mountains are like virtues. You conquer the summits with perseverance, patience, friendship, and likewise, we don't go to heaven alone. We climb toward the truth, who is Jesus Christ, with all Christians within the church. We need one another. That's what I like in mountaineering, this great solidarity and fraternal love.
After a long and cold climb down the mountain, the team was reunited at base camp at about 9 p.m. The next morning, the team returned to Amecameca to celebrate Mass and Eucharistic adoration and to thank God for their successes and safety. The team then drove to a town about an hour and a half from the city of Puebla called Tlachichuca, which lies just beneath the expedition's second destination mountain, Pico de Orizaba. Pico de Orizaba is also known as Citlaltepetl, which is Nahuatl for Star Mountain. At 18,400 feet, it is the largest mountain in Mexico and the third largest in North America. The team had arrived later than planned to the local mountaineering service that was expecting to drive them to base camp, Also, bad weather was in the forecast, adding another variable to the mix. A number of plans were proposed.
Before the really bad weather came in.
Yeah, we saw the clouds up there tonight as we drove in.
Finally, the team decided to give it a go and attempt to drive their van up to base camp. After almost an hour of driving up the side of the mountain toward base camp, it was decided that, due to largely impassable road conditions, continuing in the van they were driving was not an option. The team was forced to turn around and drive back down the mountain and stay at a Basilian religious community located in a small town outside Tlachichuca. The next day, the team was able to regroup, catch up on sleep and food, and meet to decide where to go from there. That afternoon, a few members of the team decided to go with one of the Basilian priests on a walk through the local town. Along the walk, the team met happy and faithful families living in the midst of great poverty. Father Antoine entertained the children with his tricks. Another problem that had arisen was that Father Reyes, the Cuban priest, was still held up trying to get the necessary permission to leave Cuba. In Cuba, citizens do not have the same freedoms enjoyed by those in free countries. Getting permission to leave even for just a few days can be difficult and arbitrary. The team's Pico de Orizaba aspirations were in jeopardy as they waited for news concerning Father Alberto. Finally, news arrived that Father Alberto would be arriving in Mexico the next morning. Because of time constraints, the team then made the difficult decision not to climb Pico as an act of solidarity with the suffering people of Cuba, and would climb a smaller mountain closer to where Father Alberto would be arriving. Although climbing Pico would have been a fantastic experience, every member of the team thought it most important to unify the group for the final climb. That evening, Father Antoine focused his homily on the need for adoration as a way to grow closer to Jesus through the Eucharist. Father Antoine and his community, the community of St. John, have worked diligently to spread the beauty of Eucharistic adoration around the world, especially to young people.
Tonight, at the end of this week, in the mountain where we wanted to climb a summit, we don't want to forget that the real summit of our life is to love our neighbor as Jesus asks us to love our neighbor. St. John is very clear in the first epistle that to receive the Eucharist is a wonderful gift, a wonderful act of faith in the love that Jesus has for each one of us. But once we receive this love in the Eucharist, we need to give the same love, this divine love to others. We want to spend time, not only at Mass, to receive this incredible gift of the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, but we want to take time to say thank you to the Father in heaven for having sent His Son on earth, saving us and at the same time revealing to us His infinite love for us. The Holy Father, and he's not the first one, has insisted and was very clear with young people, not only with adults, that our love for God is not complete by going to Mass only, but by extending our time spent close to the Lord in Eucharistic adoration, like to extend our thank you to God. The Holy Father in Rome, 2000, on the Jubilee year, said to the young people, "Dear friends, when you go back home," because the Holy Father knows that during this exciting period, short 5 days period of the World Youth Days, young people get excited to be together. It's a wonderful experience of the universality of the Church, but in a sense, when we go back home, what do the young people find as supports for their new flame for Jesus that they found. Sometimes their parents didn't care, their buddies don't care. Nobody seems to care around them. The Holy Father insists, dear friends, when you go back home, set the Eucharist at the center of your personal life. The Eucharist is the sacrament of the presence of Christ, who gives himself to us. Why? Because he loves us. There is no other reason. The Eucharist is personal. I cannot eat for someone else. Jesus chose the food to be food in order to mean that he didn't just save the whole world and love every people in the abstract or loving everyone as a crowd. No. The food we receive in the Eucharist means the personal relationship he wants to have with each one of us.
The next morning, the team finally had the opportunity to meet Father Alberto Reyes, who as a priest in Cuba, regularly leads groups of young people to the mountains. Although their plan to climb Pico de Orizaba would not come to be, the opportunity to spend this time with Father Alberto and learn more about the struggles of the Cuban people was more than worth it. On January 12th, a week after their adventure began, the Eucharist Expedition team members returned to honor their mother. Here the team gave thanks for all their experiences and graces. They gave thanks for their safety, as well as their successes and setbacks. In their final Mass as a team, Father Alberto was able to celebrate with a packed church at Tepeyac. At the end of Mass, Father Alberto addressed the Mexican people and shared a very personal message from the people of Cuba.
Bien, y antes de la bendición, permítanme dos palabritas. Una, que yo estoy muy contento de celebrar hoy la misa aquí. Es la primera vez en mi vida de sacerdote que celebro una misa aquí. Y el 12 de diciembre pasado cumplí 7 años de sacerdote. Yo me ordené, gracias a Dios, el día de la Virgen de Guadalupe. Para mí esto es un regalo y una bendición. Y lo otro es, tengo ganas de decir esto: México aprovecha lo que tienes. Yo vengo de un país donde la fe es perseguida, donde la iglesia no es libre. Yo atiendo 7 pueblos, de esos 7 pueblos solo en 3 tengo templo, en los otros me reúno en las casas, no nos dejan construir templos. Hay presión sobre la iglesia. Si la gente necesita un sacerdote, no siempre lo encuentra. Hay lugares donde se puede dar misa una vez al mes porque no se puede llegar más. Así vivimos la fe en Cuba, defendiéndola con los dientes, Ustedes tienen tantas posibilidades de vivir aquí su fe. Tienen libertad, tienen templos, tienen sacerdotes. Yo sé que a veces tal vez uno no encuentra a la persona que uno quisiera para confesarse, para conversar. Yo sé que a veces incluso la misma iglesia tiene que revisar tal vez si está disponible. Yo entiendo todo eso, pero uno tiene que buscar. Ustedes tienen mucha posibilidad de vivir plenamente su fe. No pierdan eso. Nosotros en Cuba vivimos luchando por la fe. Y es fuerte. Y hay gente que recorre kilómetros para poder ir a una misa. No pierdan lo que tienen. No dejen de usar lo que tienen. Dios ha sido grande con México. Dios le ha dado mucho a México. Abran los ojos. Yo tal vez no soy nadie para decir eso, pero nací, crecí, vivo, porque voy a regresar en un país donde cuesta vivir la fe, donde continuamente tienes que levantarte a luchar por tu fe. Y es un pueblo muy sediento de Dios. no pierdan la bendición de poder vivir la fe con todas las posibilidades que tienen aquí. Y terminamos con la bendición.
The Eucharist Expedition had ended. As the members reflected on the week and on the different ways they had grown, they all shared a renewed commitment and appreciation for their Catholic faith and a deeper understanding of the mysterious power that the Eucharist can have on their daily spiritual lives. Jordan, who was the only non-Catholic in the group and who later that year was confirmed into the Catholic Church, now sees the expedition as playing a vital role in developing his devotion to the Eucharist.
At the time of the expedition, I was still learning about my faith, and to be around this group of men who had such a passion for their faith and especially for the Eucharist, and yet they also understood the struggles that we all go through when trying to grow in our faith was very important. Having the opportunity to pray and climb with this group of men, both priests and laymen, gave me a unique perspective of the Church, an active, adventurous, hopeful view.
Looking back, Jerry has grown to appreciate the expedition's mission more and more, which in many ways was countercultural, an expedition not focused on individual accomplishment, but on spiritual growth.
The philosophy of mountain climbing is usually based on the self-centered of the person being able to summit and to conquer this huge mountain, which we see as a huge symbol of success because it's some of the tallest peaks in the world. For us, we thought of it differently. We had the Eucharist as our summit, and we also had the mountain as a summit. And this way we were able to summit both spiritually and physically. This trip taught me something about the Eucharist, and it wasn't easy to fit in the Eucharist into a climb. Over there, you're struggling for air, you're struggling for oxygen to your body, you're struggling for food because all the food you had to carry with you the whole day, and you even now have to carry something extra to be able to celebrate Mass. But yet, through all the difficulties, the Mass was the most peaceful. It's what brought the team together, I believe.
Although the expedition had officially ended, the climbing continued. Father Alberto and Mexican priest Father Ernesto, who later recovered from his sickness, were able to successfully climb to the summit of Pico de Orizaba just a week after the expedition had ended. Also, 2 years after the original Eucharist expedition, Father Antoine, David, and Jordan, along with a group of 3 others, successfully summited Pico de Orizaba. The team has hopes of continuing to climb other mountains together while proclaiming the greatness of Christ in the Eucharist. Pope John Paul II called on everyone, but especially the younger generations, to live bold, courageous, and countercultural lives. In this way, indeed, the mountain climb is the perfect metaphor for the ideal Christian life. Psalm 24 asks the question, "Who shall climb the mountain of the Lord?" Many people will look at the training, hard work, dedication, faith, and sacrifice it takes to climb some of the highest mountain peaks in the world and ask, why? Why work so hard for what seems to be so little? This is also a question many Christians, especially young Christians, are asked every day. Why dedicate your life to a God you can't see or hear? Why make sacrifices and try to make good come out of suffering? Why deny yourself so many of life's pleasures? What makes you think He can have a positive impact on your daily life? The answer? We climb every day, both physically and spiritually, because of faith. We have faith in the freedom the mountain and our belief in Him can give. We have faith in the unseen God because we can see His works and they are good. We have humility in the face of God and His magnificent love. We have respect for His unbelievable gifts. We climb as a team in spiritual solidarity with all of our brothers and sisters throughout the world. We believe He can have a positive impact on our daily lives because He is wholly present in the Eucharist and wants to be with us. And so, if we become as little children in our trust in Him, He encourages and challenges each of us not only to dare to dream, but to dare to dream the impossible dream, because with Him, all things are possible. The Eucharist confirms this.